There is a strange kind of tension that can exist between two people when one person hasn't done anything wrong. You walk into the room, you speak normally, you aren't trying to impress anyone, you aren't competing, you aren't asking for attention, and yet someone seems uncomfortable. Their tone changes, their posture changes, they become unusually quiet, or suddenly they need to prove something. You may wonder, what did I do? Sometimes the answer is nothing, because a person doesn't always feel threatened by what you are doing. Sometimes they feel threatened by what your presence represents, your confidence, your independence, your ability to speak without fear, your willingness to walk away, your refusal to seek approval, your ability to remain calm when everyone else is reacting. These qualities can be deeply uncomfortable to someone who has built their identity around being the confident one, the important one, the person with control, the person everyone listens to, and suddenly you arrive, not trying to take their position, not trying to challenge them, but simply existing differently. And somehow, your presence changes the psychological balance. Carl Jung understood that much of human behavior operates beneath conscious awareness. We don't always know why someone makes us uncomfortable. We simply feel it. We react. We defend. We criticize. We distance ourselves. And sometimes we create a problem with another person because it's easier than confronting what that person awakens inside us. One of the first signs is performance. You say something ordinary, they know more. You mention something you've accomplished, they've done something bigger. You share an idea, they immediately explain why their version is better. You aren't competing, but they are. Suddenly every conversation becomes an opportunity to establish position. Who knows more? Who earns more? Who has more experience? Who is more respected? Who has the better connections? Who has the better life? This can look like confidence from the outside, but genuine confidence rarely needs constant demonstration. A secure person can allow someone else to be impressive without feeling diminished. They can say, "That's interesting. You did well. I don't know," and move on. But insecurity has a different rhythm. It keeps score, because underneath the performance, there may be a fear. If they are impressive, what does that say about me? And once someone starts measuring their worth through comparison, your presence can become exhausting for them, not because you're doing too much, but because they are constantly trying to determine whether they're still enough. Another behavior can be much more subtle. Instead of competing with you, they make you question yourself. You say, "I think I'm ready." They say, "Are you sure?" You say, "I think this opportunity could change my life." They say, "Don't get your hopes up." You tell them about a goal. They immediately explain everything that could go wrong. Again, caution isn't automatically insecurity. Sometimes people protect us from unrealistic decisions. Sometimes honest criticism is exactly what we need. But there's a difference between helping someone think clearly and repeatedly teaching them to distrust themselves, especially when their confidence is the thing changing the relationship. Because if you become more certain, you're harder to influence. If you trust your judgment, you need less external validation. And if someone has become accustomed to having psychological influence over you, your growing independence can feel like a loss of power. So they don't necessarily tell you, "Don't succeed." They say, "Are you really sure you're capable?" When doubt doesn't work, insecurity sometimes reaches backward. It reminds you of the person you used to be. You weren't always this confident. Remember when you couldn't even? You're acting different now. You think you're better than everyone. These comments can sound like jokes. Sometimes they are. But sometimes they're attempts to restore an old identity, because the old you was easier to understand. The old you asked for approval. The old you explained yourself. The old you tolerated more. The old you could be influenced. And now, you have changed. You've learned to say no. You've learned to trust yourself. You've stopped explaining every decision. You've become comfortable disappointing people. And that creates a problem for anyone who was comfortable with your old boundaries. Your growth changes the relationship. And sometimes, the person who says, "You've changed," is simply describing something that is true. You have. That's what growth does. And perhaps this is the first thing to understand. Someone can feel threatened by you without you ever threatening them. Your confidence isn't an attack. Your boundaries aren't an attack. Your success isn't an attack. Your independence isn't an attack. But to someone whose identity depends on comparison, your growth can feel like one. And when that feeling becomes uncomfortable, behavior changes. Have you ever noticed how quickly some people respond when you begin speaking with certainty? You say, "This is what I want." And immediately, you can't know that. You say, "I'm comfortable with my decision." And you're being stubborn. You establish a boundary. Suddenly, you're selfish. You stop explaining yourself. Suddenly, you're arrogant. This is one of the most interesting effects of insecurity. Your confidence can become threatening, not because you're imposing it on anyone, but because it removes their ability to define you. When you trust yourself, other people's opinions become suggestions rather than commands. And for someone who was accustomed to influencing your decisions, that can feel like losing control. So they may challenge your confidence, not necessarily because your decision is wrong, but because your certainty makes them less powerful in the relationship. And this is why healthy boundaries can reveal unhealthy dynamics. The moment you stop being easy to control, some people suddenly discover that they preferred you uncertain. When insecurity is activated, small things can become strangely important. You speak confidently, it's a problem. You don't respond immediately, it's a problem. You make your own decision, it's a problem. You receive praise, somehow, that's a problem too. The issue changes constantly, but the emotional reaction remains. This is why you shouldn't focus only on the content of the conflict. Look at the pattern. Are they genuinely upset about what happened, or do they seem uncomfortable with what your behavior represents? Independence, confidence, recognition, freedom. The specifics may change, but the underlying tension remains, and sometimes the smallest disagreement is simply the place where a much larger insecurity found somewhere to escape. You may eventually notice something almost absurd. You're not competing, but somehow everything becomes a competition. You mention your new job, they mention theirs. You talk about something you've learned, they explain how they already knew it. You share a personal achievement, they tell you about someone who achieved more. You say you're happy, they explain why their happiness is greater. You don't even realize a competition has started until you notice you're being measured. This isn't always arrogance. Sometimes it's fear. Fear that someone else might be moving ahead. Fear that their identity is losing its position. Fear that if you shine, they disappear. But here's the strange thing. Secure people don't disappear when someone else shines. They simply stand beside the light. Insecure people may feel they need to compete with it. But why does another person's confidence feel so threatening to someone who is secure? It doesn't. And that distinction matters. Because when your presence repeatedly creates tension, the real story may not be about your behavior at all. It may be about an internal comparison happening inside someone else. And this is where Jung's idea of the shadow becomes impossible to ignore. There is a reason confident people can sometimes make insecure people uncomfortable. It isn't always because confidence is loud. In fact, the most threatening confidence is often quiet. You don't announce that you're confident. You simply don't apologize for existing. You speak when you have something to say. You remain silent when you don't. You don't need everyone to approve of you. You can walk into a room without asking, "Do I belong here?" And that can awaken something in someone else, because your confidence may remind them of the confidence they don't feel inside themselves. This is one of the uncomfortable possibilities of the Jungian shadow. We can encounter qualities in other people that we've pushed away in ourselves. Courage, independence, ambition, assertiveness, freedom. Sometimes we admire those qualities. Sometimes we resent them. And the difference can reveal something about our relationship with ourselves. Someone who has never allowed themselves to be assertive may experience your assertiveness as aggression. Someone who has always sought approval may interpret your independence as arrogance. Someone who has spent their life suppressing ambition may call your ambition selfish. Not because your behavior necessarily is those things, but because your behavior touches something inside them. And suddenly, you become a mirror they didn't ask to look into. Jung also explored the psychological mechanism of projection. Sometimes, what we cannot comfortably recognize within ourselves becomes easier to see in someone else. The insecure person may call the confident person arrogant. The person who desperately wants recognition may accuse someone else of seeking attention. The person who is deeply competitive may insist that everyone around them is competing. Again, this doesn't mean every criticism is projection. That's important. Sometimes someone really is arrogant. Sometimes someone really is attention-seeking. Sometimes criticism is justified. But projection becomes interesting when the emotional response is disproportionate. When your ordinary confidence produces an extraordinary reaction. When your simple boundary becomes a personal insult. When your success seems to require an explanation. When your independence feels like rejection. The behavior may be happening in front of them, but the emotional meaning may be coming from somewhere deeper. And this gives us a powerful question. Are they responding to who I am, or to what they believe my existence says about them? Because sometimes you're not the threat. The comparison is. Another hidden fear is more primitive: losing position. Human beings naturally notice where they stand within a group. Who leads, who follows, who is admired, who is needed, who has influence. And when someone has built their identity around being important, your growing confidence can feel like a challenge. Maybe they were always the person everyone called, the expert, the decision maker, the one with the answers. Then you begin developing your own judgment. You stop asking them what to do. You make decisions independently. Other people begin listening to you. And suddenly, their old position feels less secure. You haven't taken anything from them. But the psychological hierarchy has changed. And that can be frightening to someone whose self-worth depends on being above someone else. This is why some people become more controlling. Precisely when you become more independent, more critical, when you become more confident, more dismissive, when others begin respecting you, your growth has not stolen their value, but it may have removed the comparison that once made them feel valuable. Beneath the fear of losing position, there may be something even more painful: the fear of becoming irrelevant. We all want to feel that our lives matter, that our presence means something, that we contribute, that someone needs us. But imagine building your identity around being needed, and then watching someone become independent. They stop asking for advice. They solve their own problems. They make their own decisions. They no longer need permission. And suddenly, the relationship changes. The person hasn't rejected you. They've simply become capable. But if your identity depended on their dependence, their independence can feel like rejection. This is why some people react strangely when you become stronger. They don't necessarily want you weak, but they may miss the version of you who made them feel important. And that's a difficult thing to admit. So instead of saying, "I miss feeling needed," they may say, "You've become distant." Instead of saying, "I'm afraid I don't matter to you anymore," they may say, "You think you're better than everyone now." Insecurity often speaks indirectly, and sometimes what sounds like criticism is actually fear of losing connection. When someone feels threatened by your confidence, they may try to reduce it, not necessarily through an obvious attack. Sometimes it's one sentence. "Don't get too confident. You think you know everything. You're becoming arrogant. You need to stay humble." Humility is valuable, but there is a difference between humility and self-erasure. Healthy humility says, "I know I don't know everything." Insecurity-driven criticism says, "Don't become too sure of yourself." The difference matters because some people are comfortable with you having confidence as long as it never changes your behavior toward them. The moment your confidence produces boundaries, they become uncomfortable. You stop accepting insults. They call you sensitive. You stop explaining yourself. They call you arrogant. You protect your time. They call you selfish. You disagree. They call you difficult. Sometimes, what people call your personality problem is simply the first boundary they have encountered from you. Another common defense is humor. You become more confident, and suddenly you're Mr. Important. You get promoted, and now you're too good for everyone. You become independent, and they joke that you've become difficult. Everyone laughs. You laugh too. But then it happens again, and eventually you realize the joke always moves in the same direction. It reduces you. Your confidence becomes arrogance. Your boundaries become selfishness. Your ambition becomes obsession. Your independence becomes isolation. Humor can be a safe disguise for insecurity because it allows the speaker to retreat. If you object, relax, "I'm only joking." If you stay silent, the message still lands. Don't become too confident. Don't become too successful. Don't become too independent. Don't make us uncomfortable with the person you're becoming. And perhaps the healthiest response isn't confrontation. It's awareness. You don't have to defend every part of your growth. Sometimes, you simply stop giving certain comments access to your identity. Once you recognize these patterns, there is another danger. You can become obsessed with them. Every strange look becomes evidence. Every disagreement becomes jealousy. Every criticism becomes insecurity. Every person who dislikes you becomes someone who secretly feels threatened. And now, you've built another prison. You're still measuring yourself through other people's reactions, just from the opposite direction. Jung's psychology isn't an invitation to diagnose everyone around you. It's an invitation to become more conscious. So ask yourself, what is actually happening? Look for patterns. Look for repeated behavior. Separate genuine criticism from projection. Separate disagreement from hostility. Separate someone's insecurity from your own assumptions. And then, decide what deserves your attention. Because you don't need to know exactly what someone feels inside to know whether a relationship is healthy for you. You don't need their psychological diagnosis. You need clarity. There is a simple way to recognize psychological security. A secure person can watch you grow without needing to shrink you. They can watch you become confident without becoming defensive. They can watch you succeed without turning your success into a competition. They can disagree with you without needing to destroy your confidence. They can watch you become independent without taking it personally. And most importantly, they can let you become someone different without demanding that you remain who you were. These people are worth keeping because relationships should not require one person to remain small so another person can feel secure. Real friendship doesn't need hierarchy. Real love doesn't require dependence. Real confidence doesn't need someone else to fail. And real security can stand beside another person's light without needing to extinguish it. Maybe you've experienced it. You walked into a room and someone changed. You became more confident and someone became more critical. You became successful and someone became competitive. You established boundaries and someone accused you of becoming selfish. You stopped seeking approval and someone told you that you'd changed. Maybe you wondered, what did I do? Sometimes, nothing. Sometimes your growth simply changed the psychological balance of the relationship, and that can reveal things. It can reveal insecurity. It can reveal comparison. It can reveal fear. It can reveal a person's dependence on being needed. It can reveal how much of their identity was built around being above someone else. But remember, their reaction isn't your responsibility. You don't need to become smaller. You don't need to hide your intelligence. You don't need to apologize for your confidence. You don't need to pretend you're less capable so someone else can feel more capable. But you also don't need to become arrogant. You don't need to prove that they were threatened. You don't need to win. You don't need to expose them. You don't need to make them regret underestimating you. There is a quieter kind of power, the power to remain yourself, without needing everyone around you to approve of who you're becoming. So if someone feels threatened by your confidence, let them have their feelings. If someone struggles with your boundaries, let the boundary remain. If someone becomes uncomfortable with your success, you don't have to become unsuccessful to comfort them. And if someone leaves because they cannot relate to the person you're becoming, allow the relationship to tell you what it can and cannot hold. Because your life is not supposed to remain frozen simply because someone else was comfortable with an earlier version of you. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to become more confident, more peaceful, more independent, more honest, more yourself. And perhaps the greatest realization is this: you were never the threat. The threat was the comparison happening inside them. Your presence simply revealed it. So keep walking, keep becoming, and don't spend the rest of your life trying to make yourself less visible. Just because someone else hasn't learned how to stand comfortably beside your light. You don't have to be above them. You don't have to be beneath them. You simply have to be yourself. And now I'm curious, have you ever noticed someone treating you differently after you became more confident? Maybe they became competitive. Maybe they criticized you more. Maybe they reminded you of who you used to be. Or maybe you simply stopped allowing their reaction to determine how you saw yourself. What changed when you became more confident? Tell me in the comments. Someone reading your experience may recognize their own story in it. And remember, you don't have to shrink to make someone else feel secure. Keep becoming.